Okay. Okay. So, uh, where are you, William? Are you in the, you're not in, oh, we lost the sound again. Scott, can you hear him?
I can hear you. I can't hear
You
William
can't
though.
hear William again. Yeah, we had your sound there for
No,
half a second there, William, and then it went out again.
nothing.
Yeah. I think we got something there.
Is that it?
Yeah,
There we
that's it.
go.
Yeah. Well, it's gone
No,
again.
now we lost you again.
It must be a kink in your headset. Must be like a kink in your wire, or something, like a short in that wire. Like when you moved in, it came on.
Does that work?
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, let's just do that. I'll use
Yeah,
the
that,
microphone for the computer.
okay. Yeah, it's not even that bad, really. The
Okay, good.
sounds not that bad. Good to see you, William.
Likewise, good to see you as well.
So we have Scott Schara here. Are you guys familiar with one another in the
I
podcasting
feel
world?
I feel like his name seems familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't familiar with you until Tanner invited us, so then I looked up what you're doing. Yeah, I'm relatively new to this game. My daughter was murdered in a hospital in October of
Oh,
21. And so then I started digging in, researching, and we have probably the first lawsuit that's going to see a jury trial that comes out of COVID.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've heard your story. I've heard you on another podcast. Maybe SGT report.
Sure, I've been on with Sean several times.
Yeah, me too. So I think I've heard you there. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. I
Thank
knew
you.
a couple of people who were murdered in the hospitals. So one was Russ Dizdar, who wrote the book The Black Awakening,
Okay.
and it's kind of very timely, actually, believe it or not. I'll have to dig out his old book. He sent me a signed copy of his book, but a lot of what he predicted is kind of happening now in the common culture. And then another one was Rob Skiba. I don't know if you've heard of the name Rob Skiba.
Yeah, Rob's wife connected with me shortly afterward. He is non coincidentally, because of God's providence, he died the same day as Grace.
Oh wow,
Grace
oh,
was
that's
only in the hospital 7 days. Rob was in 40 days.
Wow.
yeah. No, it's incredible. He wanted to get out too. Skiba's like, get me out of here, and
Yep. Yep.
he
It's
didn't.
strange.
Unfortunately, he was one of many. There's a huge websites out there of like the hospital kill protocols are out there. So
Correct.
it's dark. The Biden administration's very dark.
Well, the Trump administration's darker.
Well, that's our good argument. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever walked away from Operation Warp Speed. So
Well,
he's
in
sticking
fact,
with that story.
he's doubling down on it, which is, it isn't strange if you can zoom out and see what's going on. But yeah, I voted for him twice. I did not vote in the last election because I'm not participating in evil anymore. But
Oh, good for
yeah,
you.
just think about it from just a base level. Would you rather know what you're getting? So, I mean, I would never endorse Harris, of course, but would you rather know what you're getting with Harris or have it hidden with Trump? So then you can't really figure out what's going on until it's too late.
Well, that didn't take long at all. This is exactly why I wanted to get you two guys together. Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, who knows? I mean, he's not very obvious in a lot of his actions, so I think he's kind of opaque intentionally. So we'll see what happens what he really does in 10 days. It's a 10-day countdown.
Yeah.
So um, he has surrounded himself with some very interesting characters, and that's kind of makes things going to be interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
As far as the overt versus or what's the terminology that you use? Esoteric and exoteric?
That's what I
Um,
use. Yes. But I mean, you could look at macro, micro. Yeah.
or right hand and left hand even is where my mind was going. If
Well, but in both exoteric and esoteric, there's left hand and right hand.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, so like, in exoteric, you have Democrat, Republican, that's left hand, right hand. Esoteric, you have the Antichrist system and the false prophet system. So it's always the duality is Satan's nature.
Yeah. And these are kind of basic tenets of many magical systems, right, William?
Yeah, I would say esoteric, exoteric, the two-faced things. I think the I think it was it macro universe and micro universe, those types of things. But the how much of these guys are magicians. I think Trump is pretty high level. I think he's a high level initiate, and I think it's seen by kind of his decorations. Also, he in his kind of gilded offices or the monolith style buildings that he has, which are kind of a giveaway. He has a tesseract, which is a very high level, high end esoteric occult symbol. And maybe I can bring it up. Let me see if I can find it. But you wouldn't know this symbol unless you were initiated. You would have to do a lot of specified reading to understand the meaning of the tesseract, which is basically a 4-dimensional cube. And the concept is you put your underlings and your enemies inside this cube. You control them without their knowledge, and he knows that. So I don't know how he came across that, whether it was that guy Roy Cohn, who he was friends with, or whatever, but he's definitely networked into some kind of higher knowledge, esoteric knowledge type stuff. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I believe I wasn't familiar with that, but I mean just the term mega, they're parading this right in front of us, and I have come to believe that is one of the responsibilities that Satan has to have. And I get that from Genesis 18:17, when God said to Abraham, "Shall I withhold from Abraham what I am about to do?" So God's goal is to empower his people, protect his people. But Satan is the ultimate legalist. And so Satan's goal is to get us to tacitly or sometimes directly contract with him. So voting, for example, when we vote now, we participated, and we're participating in our own demise. So the term mega, have you dug into that, William?
Not in great detail.
Yeah, so it's the fifth level, the highest level in the Church of Satan.
So the role of consent,
this type of thing is just, it's going on all the time. It's right in front of us. If you peel apart Trump's speeches, so when he's on Joe Rogan before the election, he said we got to have a national ID. I mean, and you can see people going along with this because we got to fix the election, we got to control the borders, so that national ID will do that. Well, I mean, they have no intention of controlling the borders, and I have come to believe Trump was in on the stolen election, all to set up his reelection.
That would be very profound. I know that he he prefers this song. He was going to use the song "My Way," which is literally a satanic kind of anthem. Sinatra sang it, but it's actually sung inside the Satanic Church. It's kind of about the primacy of the individual self.
Interesting.
Total egotism. Yeah. No, that's real. And I think he was dissuaded from it. Like, people were like, "Oh man, this might be too obvious." Tanner, is there a way for you to allow me to share my screen? Because it seems to be disabled.
Oh, let's see.
I'll show you what this tesseract. This is kind of like,
there you go,
putting the symbols out. There we go. Putting symbols out into the public that the public doesn't understand. But this is it. If you watch this is him. This is very similar. This is Trump in his gilded, offices, the golden boy, whatever, Apollyon.
Yeah.
And this door, the square within a square, is called the tesseract. And it symbolizes just what I said, this kind of control of things. And only a really high initiate would know this. This is really kind of super esoteric, as I would say. But you will see this used often in so many different instances. It's in Eyes Wide Shut. It's in The Shining. It's in Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary is in the Tesseract, so she's being controlled the whole time. But only the insiders would see that. When they watch that movie, they'll be like, "Yes, she's under my control." But the public doesn't see it. They don't know how to interpret it. She literally lays her head down on this symbol. There's a Tesseract pillow in this one sequence. But guess what? Like after 9/11, we can go into the whole symbology of the high level, incredible esoteric stuff in 9/11. But when the towers went down, the remnants of the towers are two tesseracts, right? Two squares within a square, right there in there, right there. And it's an incredible moment, right? That the Carter memorial, they're all sitting there. All these people that have all this inside knowledge, like almost Masonic knowledge. It's Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, and his wife. It's just like a convening of a bunch of like arch villains and stuff like that. And Melania's freaking out. She's crying and she's super emotional because I think she knows what's going on underneath the surface that the public doesn't understand. And when they tried to blow off Trump's head in July, it's an interesting speech. I'll see if I can find it, because he was talking about 93. He mentions 93 three times, which is an incredible marker to Crowley, which a lot of people would not even notice. He's like talking about 93, and then he gets shot. And I don't know why he's doing that. But when you start to kind of, the wheels in your brain start moving, you realize he knows a lot more than what he's imparting. And it kind of is indicative of kind of like what his lifestyle's about, you know.
Don't you think he's implicit in most of that, or all of it?
Yeah, yes, I do. I think so.
Regarding this,
he's not a Christian. He's never really came. He had that one time he came that book when there was the riot in front of the White House. He kind of came out and held the Bible, but he didn't state anything meaningful. So he didn't know the proper references or terms, and he held it up like a prop, frankly. So I think that these are just more and more clues of kind of how he operates.
Yeah. Is there a theme in Freemasonry? I've heard this maybe from you, or I'm not sure where I learned it, but it's basically the idea where you have to descend to then ascend. You go down to rise. So the first step is to take a humble pose, I guess would be how they might describe it. But in actual ritual practice, maybe there'll be an entryway where you walk down into a building before you then ascend the elevator. That would be evidence of Masonic inspiration in architecture. But then
there
in these
certainly
events,
those staircases and things like that. The spiral staircase is totally Masonic.
So if that's a theme, transferring it, and you hear this humiliation ritual kind of bantied about also. It's the idea that they put you down before they rise you through the ranks. I feel like we've seen some of that at play in different people's careers, and perhaps Trump's. And maybe even like the assassination attempt, where you could view that maybe as a form of humiliation, although it really lionized him, in the eyes of most of the public, I'd say. But
I think so. I mean, it's almost like biblical, like the book of Revelation, the wound to the head that survives or whatever. But there's weird things going on. Like he's talking about the Union of North America, which is, putting the 10 kingdoms together from Revelation. So it's remarkable how much like what is going on is biblical. So, yeah, but I do think that downward, I mean, you definitely are initiated, and almost all of these kind of initiated functions or initiatory groups of different times, the Masons and others have some kind of death and rebirth ritual.
Like I view the failed election. I agree that was part of the plan for him to lose that election. That kind of fits the mold of this humiliation or a ceremonial thing where he loses and then he comes back stronger and to fulfill whatever purpose. We'll see.
I mean, There's a lot of purposes to fulfill. Like I'm in California, and it's just incredible. The fires don't seem to be stopping. The whole cities are gone. Like Pacific Palisades is gone. Altadena's gone, which I never would have thought of. That whole city would just burn to a crisp. So,
I
and
saw
it's still
Malibu. Yeah, the Malibu beach homes were all gone. Where are you in that area?
LAX. I'm right by LAX. So I'm downwind from all the smoke.
Okay.
But I've drove around. Like I've lived here 20 years, so I know the area pretty well. And you would never think that Pacific Palisades would burn to a crisp. And those are $5 million houses a pop, some uninsured. We'll see. I mean, I don't know whether they'll honor their insurance policies. So it's going to be interesting. It's just the beginning. I mean, I think it's going to create a massive change in the political structure of California and the country, really, because people will see, wow, we could be next from this kind of level of corruption and incompetence. It's really almost like Chinatown, the movie that takes place in Los Angeles. It's like that kind of level of corruption. And it's interesting because Chinatown was out about water rights, too, if you remember the kind of theme of that film and corruption and stuff. So we'll see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's bad. Go watch Chinatown again. And you'll find out that all these things, they just found out today that the reservoir that was supposed to serve Pacific Palisades was not working and was not ready for this thing. And the whole thing just burnt to a crisp. There were very few firemen and access to water. So, and I think
was
these
that a
guys
Kubrick
are.
movie?
Yeah. No, it's even worse. It's a Polanski movie.
Polanski, that's right.
1974. With some interesting deaths in there, stage drowning deaths, like they drowned a guy in regular water and then he's found in salt water, and corruption in the medical examiner, and just corruption at the political level. Like it's really something else. It's kind of like almost Nicholson's journey, or Mr. Giddis, or whatever his name is. It's really his journey from kind of his naivete. This is a pretty grizzled guy, a PI. His naivete all the way into ending with pedophilia and murder, like family murder and stuff like that. It's dark. Chinatown's very, very dark.
Wow. Yeah, I have not seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
Yeah, it won the best movie award, I think, in 74 or 75. But it just shows like this underbelly of like corruption in these big cities and things like that. And it's a kind of interesting because the main character inside and outside the film, John Huston, has a very interesting background and was friends with very dark people, and kind of plays a Luciferian character in Chinatown. Elite, horses and ranches and fixing of land rights and things like that. It's without really shame, right? But yeah, it's about water rights. It's really something else. And I think that's what all this stuff is happening in California, is abuse of kind of the natural kind of bounty of California, which had tons of water. I don't know if you remember, but I think 2024, 2023 was like our most rainy season ever, and they just dropped all the water into the ocean. They didn't save it. So this whole burn down thing is like a mismanagement issue.
You think it's incompetence, or you think it's intentional?
I would hate to find out it's intentional. I believe that it's mostly incompetence. For them to intentionally, like, I don't know, maybe this is done, and I think there are arsonists going around right now trying to burn things down for anarchy purposes, or they're communists trying to overthrow the current state of things. But it would be incredible to think that these guys would do this to people. I mean, it would be the most ruthless, cold-blooded act to burn down these people's property all the way to a crisp, and their belongings and everything like that. So I guess we'll find out. I think it's incompetence. I don't think anybody in Pacific Palisades would ever imagine that the entirety of the center of that city would go to a crisp. Like, it's literally like incredible. Like, you would never drive. I've driven through there thousands of times, and I would never have thought that a fire would come through and strike everything down to the foundation.
Yeah.
It's truly unbelievable.
I mean that it's you can't help but think of Maui and the strangeness of
Yeah.
that episode, but I don't know. I'm always making the leap to the grand unifying theory that I carry around with me, which is basically my Bible. And then the trick is figuring out how it applies. And one thing that I feel like I can pretty confidently, my belief is not misplaced in that there is a prince of this world, and he is a real personality and a real force of evil, and he has an agenda. And so when I'm looking sort of for a grand architect and something that ties all this stuff together, that's just immediately I kind of assess whether how this plays backwards into some kind of satanic agenda. And it's never hard to see the strings, kind of. I'm not um, that imaginative, but I can always, that always seems to be the thing that makes the most sense to me. What about you, Scott?
Well, these type of things, when you said it would be hard to grasp the idea that they would do something at that scale, um, these people, the satanic minions, they really do not have the conscience that we have. So this doesn't hold a candle to the worldwide bioweapon that they produced as a result of the fake virus. So wrap your head around that, and they're still promoting it. So you know I think anything that we've seen historically is less than what they pulled off with this thing that they've labeled as COVID. It's so. Have you studied? Either one of you studied the Brooke Jackson lawsuit?
A little bit. That was the one out of Texas, right, where she
Correct.
was suing Pfizer. She's a
Right.
whistleblower from Pfizer.
Yeah, correct. So it's interesting how she has three different attorneys on that case. I've met Brooke also, but as I was researching that case, I was talking with our lead counsel for our lawsuit, and he happens to be one of the three attorneys. I didn't know that at the time, so he shortened my research by quite a bit. And that lawsuit was thrown out in August of 24. It's on appeal right now. They're writing the appellate brief. It's due January 27th. So it's coming up in 2 weeks. It's due. But it got thrown out because the federal government came in behind Pfizer and said, if this case gets out, it will destroy our public health agenda. And the judge bought that. So, I mean, their public health agenda is not, it is a public death agenda.
Right. Right. No
So
question.
that's how nefarious this stuff is. So when people don't, they think, well, they killed 3,000 people in a day with the Twin Towers. Why wouldn't they kill people? Why wouldn't they destroy whole cities? I don't think anything is out of the possibility, because the way they think about things is different than how we think about things. We value life. They don't see it that way.
I think you're right. And I think that Lahaina is very telling because they didn't rebuild at all. There was no incentive to come back with a thriving culture. It's just lying fallow. Like there's nothing there. So is that what's going to happen in LA? They're not going to let these people come back, or they're not going to assess or put money back towards this stuff. Like,
yeah,
you're right. I think you're right. I mean, I think that they have a larger agenda. It's some kind of larger infernal agenda that's anti-human. So like I said, I mean, they had to, California always has these fires. They had a big one here in 2018 that went all the way from the valley to the water. So this isn't something like that happens every 50 years or 100 years or something like that. So it's either intentional or incompetence. There's no other way for me to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
You just have to look at the fruit, what's accomplished. who does it serve? And that hindsight will tell that. But in the immediate, it's if you caught any of Trump's speech last night, it gives him an opportunity to ridicule his opponents, his fake opponents, in my mind. It serves to further divide, and it gives him an assertion to make. These incompetents. When I come in office, I'm I'm gonna run Newscom out of town, and it's fuel for the political fire, for the division. But then I'm sure they'll be able to put it to good financial use or whatever their plans are. It'll serve their best interests, presumably, whoever they are, whatever their plans will be. It won't be to help, the average citizen, I imagine. But
I agree. I think that's right. I had a guest on recently, Harry Fisher, who was on the front lines, and you may have seen him on social media because he was a paramedic during the whole COVID thing. So he's helping people out. And he had friends kill themselves over the whole situation. It's like he has PTSD or something, like COVID, trauma induced psychological torment or something. Anyway, but he's been tinkering around with kind of AI, asking him questions about all this stuff. And some of the answers that this kind of AI all has different character. You can pre-program a woke AI, a thoughtful AI, or whatever, but his is an uncensored AI. And some of the stuff he came back was really incredible. He said that these people at the top are Saturn worshipers that thrive off the suffering of human beings and try to profit off them like vampires. And it's really incredible. And these fires are things of opportunity where they can profit off of it. And that's the way. And if you look at Biden and Hunter Biden and the way they operate out of Ukraine, which is really just a charnel house, just like another genocidal. And there are connections between all these people, the genocides in Ukraine, Gaza, and the United States, the democide. They're all friends of each other, but they are profiting off of these murders through graft and kickbacks. And there's usually, what's really sad about a lot of genocides, a lot of people leave this out of it, but there's a lot of financial components. So people are stealing people's money and land and things like that in the past and present, whether it's like the Holocaust in Europe or something like that. So somebody's making money off of this Ukraine death, but it goes back to this whole vampire thing. And then Putin said something very unpolitical that wasn't a very kind of like austere statement. He said, and I'll have to find this thing, but he's like, this whole thing is disgusting. It fits into this whole idea of Saturn, these people thriving off of human suffering. But he said, soon the vampire ball will be over. And that's coming from like a world leader, who's fighting. Really, we don't get to see the trench fighting and the millions of people dying, but there's millions of people dead on that border war. At least, they filled their graves, like almost a biblical event. But it's interesting, and then they keep going. Like, you want to talk about keeping going. These fires are happening here, and Biden or whoever's running the government out. I think Biden's dead, actually, believe it or not. I think that guy's a fake. But whoever's running the U.S. government is still sending money to Ukraine. So you had like these people, deaths and all of their belongings gone, and they're just sent another $500 million to Ukraine. Like, what is this? Is this the humiliation? Is this the kind of belittling of the American people? Or like these are very sick, evil people to do that in the face of this much suffering. And what's also interesting is Biden was in town when the fire started. So his whole entourage came to LA and literally was here when the first fire started. What's the likelihood of that? And so then he shows up and then he leaves. Like, it's still ongoing. Like, these things are still burning down. Like, Altadena gone. Like, it's incredible. So
you're very open to the idea that there's a ritual nature to a lot of these events.
For 9/11, there's absolutely no question. And the whole COVID thing, the background, it's not the Antikythera, but there's like the symbol of Operation Warp Speed has this heavy duty, another something like a tesseract involved. Let me see if I can bring up the Warp Speed thing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that. So I think that's there too. So this is like, And then if you tie in all my research into the smiley face killings and stuff, like these guys practice very dark magic, like things that aren't the darkest stuff that aren't even in kind of books that you could read. You would have to be right. You'd have to be looking at this stuff. You'd have to kind of know. And some of this stuff is passed on through oral, like AURAL, things that aren't written down by intent, right? Crowley did the same thing. Warp speed. Yeah. See if I can
Thinking of Trump and in the context of modern magician, I can't help but think of the Freemasonic code Ordo ab Chao, right, where you divide for the purpose of conquering. That seems to be one thing that he's definitely achieved. If I were going to just guess as to what his goal, what his assigned role has been, that would be it.
Right.
To capitalize on the I guess the Obama administration achieved some division, and then Trump was just gasoline on that fire.
That little center box right there, that's
Yeah.
called like it's not anti, I forgot the word for it, but it's basically an occult symbol. So you see the corona within this box, almost kind of like a tesseract or something. But this is something that they put in the public that the public would never know. So it's another kind of esoteric.
The pentagon shape is the occult
That
symbol?
box. So that box is called,
Oh, it's a box. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Now the three-dimensional box. Okay.
Yeah, the three-dimensional box has an occult meaning, which I can't remember. Let me see if I can find it.
It's got a counterintuitive feel to it. It looks like they're going to spread the virus. Like warp speed. You wouldn't think there'd be a picture of the virus.
Yeah, no, that's true there. That's true as well. I wish I could remember what the name of this is. Anyway, it's some kind of darker thing. It comes out of kind of Eastern mysticism, actually.
But looking at the Tesseract over here, it's kind of a box within a box. I mean, you could see a similar theme there, I guess.
So, William, when, as I started researching, what God showed me was to not use Grace's story to expose evil because it fits into Satan's playbook. And so that was in July of 22. And now I've got 2.5 years into that thought process. And I've done a lot of studying on it, like, on the idea of the satanic agenda. How does this fit together? Revelation 13 has become the go-to chapter to see both systems. So I did a podcast called "The Plan to Take Down the Satanic Cabal" was written by the Satanic Cabal. So the idea, so Trump says we have to drain the swamp. So that's appealing to people, but yet, remember Satan, when Satan's war against God, this is a battle for souls. So Trump represents the same as 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the Israelites wanted a king. They didn't want God. So Trump represents that new king that's part of the false prophet system. But they're two sides of the same coin. It's the less evil side of, anybody can see that what Biden or Harris or Obama, they can see, well, that's part of the swamp. They're evil. So then, what does Trump represent? He represents, what's the goal? The goal is to get us away from God, from the satanic agenda. So consequently, that's why the title, "The Plan to Take Down the Satanic Cabal," was written by the Satanic Cabal. So then in that light, what I see, for example, the alternative media has done a fantastic job of exposing evil. But then as soon as Trump got on board, almost in lockstep, the alternative media just lines up behind Trump. And it's embarrassing to see it, to me, because almost none of them get it. None of them get that this is a spiritual agenda, and they want us to find out. They leave their footprints all over the place. They want us to find out what they're doing. The evil wants us to find out what we're doing, so then Satan can be the angel of light, because he already knows our nature. The Hegelian dialectic exposes our nature, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Well, the reaction is always fear. So as soon as all this evil gets exposed, it's like, oh my God, that's even worse than I thought. We've got to have a solution. And the angel of light is right there with the solution. And, how they dupe the Christians, I'll just go on this for just a minute, and then William, you have a lot more invested in this than I do, but as I see, the Christians all got duped because roughly in around 1850, you have Darby entered the picture, and then you have the Schofield Reference Bible. And so all the deceptions in the Schofield Reference Bible, relative to Israel, the rapture, the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, all these things are deceptions that the evangelicals bought into. And so now, and they all went behind Trump. The big time evangelicals were even saying it's a sin to not vote. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, that's how, so I can't see Trump as any way other than the angel of light side of Lucifer.
Interesting. Don't you think they've been doing the same thing to Americans since at least Clinton, or even before that, is playing them off? So Clinton, and then the savior's Bush, and then the savior's
way before
Obama.
that. Yeah. Think about, you and I are similar age. We were brought up thinking Ronald Reagan was the best president that ever lived, and he was in on it. He passed the National Childhood Vaccine Safety Act. That's killed and maimed more people than any single law that's ever been passed, other than Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, it's worse. It's worse than Roe v. Wade, maybe.
Yeah, so they've all been in on it for a long time.
Yeah,
certainly since the early 1900s.
Yeah, the symbol inside this is called the Anta Karana. That's it. That's this hidden symbol. And you'll see it here. Concept in Hindu philosophy referring to the totality of the mind.
That's the warp speed. I closed that box out. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you see that? Let me see if I can
share it again.
Yeah. So this is it right here. This is the Operation Warp Speed. That's in the back, and then that's the meaning of the Anta Karana. Let me see if I can find a better picture of the Anta. The link between the middle and higher mind, reincarnating part of the mind. Let me see if I can find a picture of an Anta Karana. Images. Yeah, so there it is. So this is. So now you can see that better, okay. Right? So you see the Anta Karana, and then look at the warp speed. It's the same type of box.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they're hitting you with the esoteric stuff right there.
A lot of different seemingly different religious systems, a lot of different symbology finds their home in these political spaces. You would think it's strange, again, unless there wasn't a single personality at the top of the order.
I think politics is their tool to get us to agree with what they're doing. So, they have to get our agreement. They have to let us know what they're doing before they do it, and they have to get us to agree. That's part of this. That's part of what they're submitting to, because Satan is still under God.
What magical principles does that bring to mind, William?
I think that it's all basically like mind control, right? So I think that all these Satanists that I've studied are all into kind of influencing and mind control. And so I think that that's kind of goes it ties into the culture, all these MK Ultra documents that were dropped in the last week or two. They had 1,200 new documents dropped. And so I think that's all that goes back to Dulles and all these other characters, Rockefellers, both brothers, David and Nelson, and all the way to 9/11, and the imposition on culture and all the stuff. So you have to kind of mind control and manipulate people to stay on top and also keep this whole vampire ball going, so to speak. So I think it's something darker, like it's something darker than merely like a class warfare or the oligarchs against us. These oligarchs are Satanists or Luciferians, so they benefited and have these ideas and implement them.
So we've heard the term revelation of the method, but we can home in a little closer to that. Isn't there some kind of magical tenet where they have to show you? And which practices do you know that to be a part of?
People said that to me. I haven't come across it in my reading yet, so I don't know. But they say that there's this principle that they have to put it out, but I haven't seen that yet. So if somebody wants to send me that reference, I'd be glad to look into it.
Okay, I just assumed I'd heard you talk about it.
I mean,
it's probably
like
some of your guests, I guess.
Yeah, I think my guests. I mean, people say like they've tried to find quotes and things, and like, where's this quote? I said, well, it's in the internet, but I haven't found that quote of like Crowley, like they call them UFOs now, but we called them demons before. I'm like, well, where's that quote? I can't find it. I can't find it in any of his writing. Like I've wasted hours trying to find that quote because people still send it to me because it's in a meme. So like this whole like revelation of the method, that I think that actually comes back to Hoffman's book and his ideas, which were the psychological warfare. What's the name of his book? It's
The Twilight Language.
That's the second one. Actually, I think I have Twilight Language. His first book went into the revelation of the method. Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare was it. This is the other one. This is the Twilight Language book. I think I have a signed copy. He actually signed it for me.
Scott, are you aware of the work of Michael Hoffman?
I'm not.
Well, we'll send you.
Yeah, this is a really good one. And also, he's the one who kind of like keyed me into the whole importance of the symbol of the monolith, the dark, which is really, he calls it an ashlar of the secret societies. And I think he's right. So you'll see this monolith all over the place. If you go look at Trump Tower in Las Vegas, where they had that bombing, the so-called bombing with the truck, it's a huge monolith. It's basically the same dimensions, pretty close to the same dimensions of the monolith that were in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Right? Totally a cult film too, by the way. Written with the help of Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah. Which features the monolith, right? In the book, the monolith is 11 feet tall too, so it's kind of holds true with the whole magical principles and all that stuff. Yeah.
So, William, did you tell Scott how it was that the event, basically 9/11, kind of triggering your study into Crowley's influence and the numerology and all that stuff?
I mean, I was not very knowledgeable. I didn't know Crowley or anything like this. Is the turn of the century, September 11th, 2001 happens. I believed the front story. A couple of years later, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And then Loose Change comes out, and it's like this is the story doesn't make any sense. But then I noticed the number 11 is all over the place, and there was a guy by the name of what was his name? Major. He was part of this thing called the Ghost Troop, who wrote an article that said, hey, there's an overabundance of 11s. He never could figure it out, but I was like, oh yeah, he's right. And then finally, I just was like in the round in the general culture, and I'm like, hold on, this is like a magical term. This leads back. And then I knew Crowley, because I knew Crowley from like Mr. Crowley, Ozzy Osbourne. And so I was like, well, is there a connection? I started reading it, and I noticed all the numbers from Crowley's kind of religion of Thelema lined up with the numbers in 9/11. I'm like, well, is this guy like, what's his cultural influence and why would he do this? And then it just kind of opened up, and that led to my first book, Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 in the New World Order. So that's kind of what led me into kind of my magical my research into magic in general and kind of all this stuff, and it goes back. Like, I mean, these guys are real. They're around. They believe in these doctrines. They're not dabblers. They do it for power, money. It's familial. It gets passed down generation to generation.
It's political.
Yeah.
They're in the UN. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they have a political and cultural aim. So, like, that's one of the things about Crowley is like, oh, he's just a magical dabbler who's strange and has strange practices. But he believed that he had political goals. Like, he thought of himself as the priest to the princes. So he was trying to, like, take the diamonds as he saw it and polish them. So he was going to the elite and trying to make change. And he believed he had a political ideology. So that's kind of like, why do people leave this out of Crowley when he thought, like, okay, we should be running things, and the best kind of political system is feudal, and I hate, I hate Protestants and Jews, and we will keep the Catholics. Like, why does he have these kind of views? So it's kind of interesting how many things are expurgated or left out in the story of Crowley and magic, and a lot of these people who are leaving these things out are really fellow travelers. And I think that really the Bush family are Thelemites. I think that they know a lot about Crowley, if not related directly to him through Barbara Bush. So people have said, like, that's not plausible, but all the numbers line up, and she looks just like Aleister Crowley. So it would make perfect sense. Yeah, so that was basically my first book. That was published 2010, almost 15 years ago. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So he arrives at this stuff through statistical analysis and just by recognizing anomalies where they exist. And I think that's really helpful. And he points them out and documents them. I know, William, you also are a Christian and you represent yourself as such, and you call your work a ministry, which it is. But Scott, I think the way you talk about these things is more of an overarching viewpoint that starts from God down, and William is
Correct.
kind of working from the ground
Yeah,
up, so to
that's really
speak.
good, Tanner. I think that's right. So, for example, when I referenced Genesis 18:17, I pull that out as a principle. So it's a principle that God laid out to Abraham and said, okay, I'm going to take care of my people and I'm going to let them know what I'm going to do before I do it. So if it's a principle, if it's part of God's character and it's a principle that he's bound by, just like he's bound by the principle of free will and he's bound by the principle of repentance. Okay, well, then so the idea that he's got to let us know what he does before he does it, his people, well, Satan also has to let his people know what he's going to do before he does it, because Satan's under God. So that's right. I'm not trying to find quotes in literature, but it just seems like, when I see it now, I can't stop seeing it. So when I said Trump was on Joe Rogan, and then in the debate with Harris, he's doubling down on Operation Warp Speed, and he lays out that we're going to have a cancer vaccine next, and he's telling everybody what's going on, but people overlook it. They just completely give him a free pass on these things, and yet he's telling us what he believes in if you're willing to look at it. So then when you get behind him then, or vote for him or whatever, now you're tacitly agreeing, and you end up participating in your own demise, which I believe that's the overriding goal of Satan, is to get us to participate. If we're heading to a new world order, a one world government, a one world religion. So, the macro view, how I see it, is that one world government is facilitated by the occult, and the occult's goal is a limited population. We have too many people on the planet. We don't have enough resources on the planet. God is not a good God, so he didn't plan for all of this, and we've got to take over the planning. So that's a one world government. The one world religion is, he's got the apostate church on his side there. So, I mean, we have 40,000 denominations. Well, Jesus never intended on denominations. So you have, these denominations that are started by Satan, and, the people are just like sheep. And so, to have a one world religion seems like that's, all this seems, I think it's going to happen in our lifetime. I think we're right there.
Yeah.
I agree.
So that's why I'm looking at it from, I don't have that research background that you have, William, where you're taking it from the occult and working up. I'm taking it from the biblical perspective and working down.
Isn't that the kind of effectiveness of Trump's willful cult of personality? Is that he can then get his whole people to just follow whatever his agenda is without a lot of question, as long as they have this kind of obeisance to him and his whatever he is, his outsized ego and that kind of thing. Like, I mean, how much of his stuff is really principles or people just following him? And that's the way they kind of structured it in the media. Like, it's not that you're based upon somebody's principles, or whether it's the Bill of Rights or free speech or things like that. It's either you're Trump or you're Biden, right? And so this fake duality, both choices may not be great. So, like, why would I want to take one or the other? Like, I'd much rather have a smaller state and my freedoms and my civil rights than either one of those two. But that's not the way it's portrayed in the media or by these oppositional parties. Like, it's whittled down to some kind of simplistic either or, almost like a WWE fight, right? A World Wrestling fight.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's a good analogy. Right,
He's acted on that stage as well, too. It's really funny.
Right. So, I mean, it's like he did the preparation to becoming what he is today, right? Did a reality show and was on World Wrestling. So, and I think that he is more than willing to kind of keep his followers in their place, in the sense that he doesn't really try to educate people about his ideas. He's really kind of just tells you what he's going to do, and they're his followers. They're his lackeys, and all these like weird rallies and stuff are kind of scary when you look at kind of past leaders and their use of the kind of cult of personality motif in their political life. And so it's not about we're trying to institute these principles. It's about me or Joe,
That's what inspired me to reach out to you, William, because I was listening to you talk to somebody, I've forgotten now, about Hitler and the way that he influenced the German population in a similar way. And you weren't suggesting that Trump had that power, but I saw that in my mind. I see him wielding influence and charisma and sort of like a stage magician, getting you stirred up here. I still haven't really figured out what he's doing with his other hand, other than dividing intentionally. Maybe that's the only goal. But did either of you happen to catch his?
It's interesting that you bring up the kind of magician kind of connection, because Hitler studied under a stage magician called Hannesen. King Charles III had this thing called the magic circle, where he literally learned how to deflect and hide things. And I think Trump is doing the same thing. So I think that these modern kind of politicians, maybe even going back into the past, whether it's even the Pharaoh who had his two magicians who contested with Moses, right? Jannes and Jambres.
Right.
This magical thing, people have forgotten that this is a component of modern wielding power, right? And if you look, so many of these guys in the past, whether it's John Dee, Queen Elizabeth, Rasputin, and Nicholas II, King Louis XIV, and like his witch. He had a literal witch who went out and poisoned people and killed his enemies and stuff. Like, these guys all are going back to like Gilles de Rais, who was really the Marshal of France. He was total occultist. This is the 16th century. And his lackey was, what was it? What was her name? Jane of Troy, or what was the girl's name who was the girl military boss in France?
Joan of Arc?
Joan of Arc, yeah. So Joan of Arc's kind of liege or boss was a full-on warlock who killed 500 boys. Like, it's unbelievable. So people who think like this stuff that happened in 9/11 is improbable may not have as and Hitler too. Hitler's obviously an occultist. All these people in National Socialism, Wavelsberg, and the Black Sun. They just may not know the kind of nuanced details of world political systems and how they really work.
Yeah. Fascinating and horrifying.
Yeah.
Well,
And they all have these wise men, right? So all these political leaders are looking for people to give them advice, whether there's astrologers or whatever, prophets. You can go back to some of these old prophets in the Old Testament, right? So
Yeah, the Witch of Endor. Yeah.
yeah, the Witch of Endor, but also like Nebuchadnezzar had his own like court prophets, and then Daniel's the one to properly, I think, interpret a dream, if I remember. And the same thing with Joseph in Egypt, right? So he's one of among the kind of states, or the state at that time, I guess you want to call it the pharaonic system, one of their wise men, right? So it's a consistent theme going back into the Old Testament, and
right.
kind of we lost it in this. And the same thing happened in Rome. We can go into Roman history, Greek history, and the what is it, the Oracle of Thebes, and all the stuff. It's all there. So.
Yeah, it's right. So look at the first supposed assassination attempt. All right, so just assume it's real for argument's sake. So people don't realize. So you mentioned in Moses and Aaron in Exodus chapter 7 and 8. Well, the magicians were able to copy everything that Moses and Aaron did up to a point. Jesus said there's going to be signs and wonders that will deceive even the elect, if that were possible. Satan can call down fire from heaven. So all these things are going to happen. God told us it's going to happen. So when the assassination attempt happens, again, assuming it's real, all of a sudden the Christians are duped. Well, look at God saved him. Well, no, if it truly was a miracle, if it was a real assassination attempt and it was a miracle, Satan can perform miracles also. And we really have to drive that point home if we're going to warn. I'm running out of gas warning Christians. They seem to be the dumbest group of the population to me.
I was going to ask you about the great delusion from Second Thessalonians. Do you think that that's upon us, or is this a test run up for the great delusion? This many people deceived. So because it says God saying essentially, because you haven't loved truth and you've sought to have your will fulfilled, I'm going to allow you to be deluded. And this is in the context of
8. Yeah. It's interesting. I haven't drilled down the word or the, because I don't, does it say a powerful delusion or the powerful delusion? I've heard different people talk about it. There's so many powerful delusions going on right now. The biggest one, at least in the United States, is Christian Zionism. That is a powerful delusion. The matrix of the world is a powerful delusion. So people don't realize that, Satan is the prince of this world. That's a powerful delusion. The world is a powerful delusion, right? The world, we want to participate. God tells us we're in the world, but we're not supposed to be of the world. So is the world the powerful delusion? Is the Schofield Bible a powerful delusion? Christian Zionism? There's all kinds of things. These are all delusions. Interestingly, what I've been looking at lately is, Satan's ability to imitate. So Satan wants to imitate God. So the idea, have you guys studied the idea of an antichrist yet?
A little bit. I mean,
so I don't believe a physical antichrist is biblical. That's where my study has gone. I think it was created as part of the Schofield Bible deception. Okay, so now if you can just believe me on that point for a minute, I don't want you to trust me. You should do your own homework. But assuming that I'm correct, that there is no physical antichrist and it's part of the Schofield Bible deception. So now when the antichrist appears on the scene, what's going on? we would know that, okay, Satan can create this Antichrist, but it has nothing to do with how God describes Antichrist in the Bible. The way God describes Antichrist in the Bible is a system. It's an Antichrist system, not a person. So it's interesting to me, when you start thinking about what power does Satan have. I reread a book that I read a long time ago by Watchman Nee, Nee. Watchman Nee was a Chinese Christian back in the 1930s, in that range, and he wrote a book called The Latent Power of the Soul. Latent, Lantent, The Latent Power of the Soul. It's a short book. And what he referenced and this really is where all of Satan's power comes from, is that when God made Adam before the fall, think about what Adam was tasked with doing. He was tasked with managing all of creation, naming all the animals, naming everything. That's not, none of us are capable of that, right? The power that he had. And so then that power was lost once the fall happened, but it's latent. That's why the latent power of the soul. So this is inside of people, and Satan has to use people to bring that out into creation and control creation with that same power that God had given to Adam to control creation.
So it's suppressed by our sin, by God's
Correct.
mandate, and in contracting with Lucifer, he can bring it out.
Correct.
God allows that to resurface in some of us, and that explains the different
I believe
successes.
it seems accurate to me. I'm not trying to be a philosopher or a prophet or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I'd like the simple.
Well, it jives with a lot of things I've heard about different people who have talked about being perfectly possessed and gaining essentially supernatural strength or intelligence or talents, things like that. There's a guy named Nathan Reynolds who I heard interviewed by English journalist podcaster Dellingpole, James Dellingpole. He did a really good interview with him recently. Both of you would probably be interested to listen
I
to
think
him.
I heard him on SGT Report. I think.
Oh, has he done that? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Talk about a story. Yeah, he's from the Reynolds tobacco family and sort of a whistleblower, essentially outed them as being Luciferian bloodline, ritualistic child abusers. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
wickedness in
interesting
the high
story.
places. I think he's been around SGT Report a few times.
Well,
But yeah,
he talks about that supernatural power that he gained as a result of contracting with the devil.
I think it's real. I think there really are Luciferians. It goes all the way back to the present. I think Hitler was one, and all these other people, Lucis Trust, Blavatsky, Bailey, they're all Luciferians, and they do it for power, right? So, like, Christ gets tempted, right, by Lucifer, the great three temptations among others, right? That's what it says in the Bible. So it's not just three; it's three that are written. But think about the people who get tempted and go, "Yes, that is what I want. I want worldly power. I want, a kingdom. I want to do this." And take on this kind of, you could call it a Luciferian archetype, right? Much like Christianity is, or there's a Christ archetype, a Jesus of Nazareth archetype, right? In a lot of ways, that's really the optimal Christian, is somebody to try to be Jesus, right? That's the whole real goal, at least one of it.
Yeah.
Is to emulate the Lamb of God, right? So then on the opposite side, then it's maybe these Luciferians are all trying to do that. Like even a modern Diddy said something like that, like I'm the devil, I do his work or whatever, So these people are doing the opposite side of that. So I think, and they're capable of doing horrible stuff, just like Scott said, this whole COVID thing and allowing whole cities to burn down to fulfill their stuff. And
they believe it. We all act on our beliefs. So beliefs drive actions. That's how we're wired. Everybody's wired that way. So they're implementing what they believe.
I agree. I think those leftists are really hardcore, and they did the same thing in Russia, right after the revolution. They killed so many people. The whole kind of ethnicity of Russia changed because they killed off all the elites, including the Romanovs, right? So there were like slaughterhouses throughout Russia where they would just bring people in and dispose of them. That was part of the revolution. That's outside of the Red Terror. So what is any different here? And Solzhenitsyn, it's interesting, he wrote the Gulag Archipelago. A lot of people don't know this, but he came to the United States. And then he would give talks, not to like elites or colleges, but go to kind of working class people and say, hey, these people are coming for you. And they're ruthless. When they come to power, they don't care. They don't have normal empathy.
Correct.
And he was right. Solzhenitsyn was absolutely right. And there's a deliberate reason I would say that a lot of his talks aren't even mentioned or suppressed because he was right. And he was always right. And he said that a lot of the people doing this thing weren't actually real Russians. They were people with different ideas from somewhere else who didn't have the kind of patriotic sensibility that the standard Russian would have. And I would say the same thing's happening now. A lot of these, I mean, you can make it there. You can split the party system not just from Republican or Democrat, but from patriot to unpaid non-patriot. Because I think the left doesn't give a crap about any of sorry my language, but doesn't care about any of the traditions that have governed this country for hundreds of years.
Yeah, for me, I understand the evils of 20th century leftists, right? And I guess I can see how that's infiltrated what we would consider even the right today. But it's still the most logical way for me to grasp it is just in the sense that there's this whatever division exists in the political landscape, it's just to achieve division and not to achieve a long-term goal other than seizing control. The one world government, I guess, right? When we think of the one world government, the new world order, I guess that does fit categorically into an historical leftist idea, right? Would you say is that just bringing the language forward? Like we were talking about the left again there. Um, so the new world order, Satan's, you know, Satan's. Scott, do you believe in a future one world under Lucifer? Um, that beast system, I guess. What's that going
That
to be to you?
that seems like that seems like that's what their goal is, but I don't see it quite as left and right. I think that's all an illusion to give us something to root for or whatever. But the when I first started looking at this, I thought, boy, COVID was quite a deception, and then you look back at 9/11, you look back at the Kennedy assassination, but then when I started, this was early on, so 2.5 years ago, and I saw the biggest deception that we've all been programmed to believe is the American dream. So the right is involved with the American dream. I mean, that's a deception.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't see it as left and right. I think it's all an illusion to get us to not realize what's going on. I mean, we've become slaves. The American dream is a slave system.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no problem embracing it as such. Yeah. I'm living it.
It changed in a
Uh,
generation. So my dad was able to yeah, my dad was able to buy a house, pay it off, no mortgage, on his job, 4 years, buy a car, good health care, all that stuff. It's all gone in a generation. So
yeah. And they have us eating out of their hands, for
for
TikTok
crumbs,
videos or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Well,
good. I
take
mean,
a
they've
look
got it
at
down.
what we sold our birthright essentially to get uh, our retirement paid for through social security and our medical to be paid for through Medicare. So then that's how they have entrapped. That's how they've enslaved us. And most people now have become dependent on the government. I grew up I'm a baby boomer. So we grew up, you work hard, you set money aside for your retirement, you can retire early and, not rely on the government. But that is not the norm. These things were set up. Think about Medicare was passed on July 30th of 1965. Nursing homes were non-existent in 1965. Nursing homes came on the scene in 67. So think through the programming with this. So the idea of Medicare, hey, we've got to take care of the elderly. Well, when did that become a government obligation? And so now Medicare, there's 135 million Americans on Medicare today. So over 1/3 of the population is on Medicare. So now you look at, well, how does Medicare take care of those people? Well, they take care of those people by Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services implement standards of care written by insurance companies because they can't do it directly. They have to do it through the insurance companies. The government can't write these directly. And the standards of care, so take cancer. So cancer, 700,000 people die of cancer annually. I'm not even talking about how they got the cancer. They got the cancer by either vaccinations or food poisoning, but just the treatment of cancer, the standard of care for cancer is chemo. Chemo has a 2.1% success rate across the board, all cancers. So that was by design. That was passed July 30th, 1965 to be able to kill 700,000 people today, every single year. So that's why I say the American dream, all a facade.
Yeah, that's our dance with the devil. Yeah, it was a bad deal.
Yeah, it was.
So when you say, you were back, Tanner, you said, well, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 10 through 12, God sends a powerful delusion. That's why, what is the powerful delusion? Is it the world? Is it Satan's world? These type of things. These are all delusions to get us to buy into, somebody else is going to take care of us other than God.
Yeah. Keeping us fixated on this kingdom, not of Jesus, Jesus said, I'm a king, but my kingdom's not here.
Right.
And then he went off to his death. And then he beat death, so there are a lot of things that keep us from placing our ultimate hope in the next life.
Right. Well, I mean, was it put your coins in heaven, right? That's the whole idea. How many of us Christians really do that?
Honestly? Yeah, but imagine how freed we'd be to love our neighbor and to not, if we weren't concerned with storing up treasure and whatever it is that preoccupies us. That's why, we only ask for today's bread. We can't become, obsessive about tomorrow's bread because then we're not free to give to our neighbor in need, I guess. The whole system, coming out of college and, being naive and thinking I was going to get my piece of the pie, I guess I felt a little bit slighted to have less success than I imagined I would. But in hindsight, I see it kind of as a gift that just always having this sort of sense of alienation and not ever really finding a home in this pursuit of mammon. Jesus himself said, "Blessed are the poor." For that reason, essentially, that's the context. When you can't become preoccupied with wealth, then you need them. Or you know what I mean? I guess that's kind of my nutshell of what he's done for me and not allowing me to. My identity isn't formed. It's not built upon how well I'm able to provide monetarily for myself, which is very contrary to the cultural language of my generation.
For sure. Mine too.
Yeah. Did you guys catch Trump's speech yesterday? He did a little dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and I caught it on YouTube last night. He had all the governors. I guess it was like a governor's dinner.
What did he say?
It's almost as interesting what he doesn't say, and I don't even know what all he's not saying, but just the language patterns I find so interesting. How he answers questions and repeats himself, and he diverts and he regurgitate statistics, kind of, oh, we won by a lot. We won by more than anybody saw coming. It was huge. Basically, he boasted the whole time. But the thing that I found most interesting was when he said, in regards to 10 days from now, this round, this administration, he said, we're entering, he said these words, he said, we're calling it the golden age. We're going to be entering into
Yeah.
the golden age. And then he said, there's a light shining on the world now. Since my election, there's a light shining on the world. And he said, people see it. People are seeing it. There's a light shining on the world. So that language just kind of caused me to raise an eyebrow. He's attributing his administration with this light. And I guess the premise is that he's allowing us to share in it and attributing it to the people who voted for him, maybe. But essentially, he's calling himself the light bearer, and he's ushering us into the golden age. We'll see what that's going to be about.
Yeah, really. God, who knows?
Yeah, I mean
That's like a Masonic thing, right? The light, come to the light bringer. That's all Masonic language.
Yeah, I get that vibe from him for sure. But you're more steeped in all that than I am. Um, well, I really want to thank you both for really this was for me. I wanted to just kind of take the pulse of the times and see where you both were at with what's happening. And it's been great. I've enjoyed having you both kind of school me a little bit here today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you again.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy to make the introduction.
Nice to meet you, Scott.
Yeah, nice meeting you too, William. I mean, your wealth of knowledge is it's fantastic.
Yeah,
and you talk so fluently about it. It's really good.
It is amazing. He's encyclopedic.
I'm a newbie in this whole thing.
I've been around a while. My first book was published 2010, so I've been kind of doing this for a little bit. It's wearying, but I've learned a lot. You can go listen to my other talks in 2010. You see where I was at there and now. Like, it's really been kind of a journey through the alternate media universe for me. Like, not a completely different way to obtain information and understanding than what comes from the television slop or Mockingbird media assets and things like that. So I've been fortunate in a lot of ways.
You're a prolific producer. I mean, he puts out so much content. You can't believe it. I mean, it is a gift. You're a gifted man, William. So
Thanks.
Thank you again. And Scott, you've made lots of progress in your research. You're an excellent researcher, and you have a real gift for sharing truth. And I appreciate your ministry so much as well.
Well, thanks, Tanner. Both you guys, as you know, I probably said to you when we first met, Tanner, that I wish I would have never met you. But I did. And, I'm thankful for guys like you. And the reason I say I wish I would have never met you is because my daughter Grace had to be murdered for me to get off of my rear end and get into the fight. But I'm in the fight now, and I'm not planning on giving up.
Well, we're glad to have you as a voice for truth, for sure. And I know God's proud of you and Grace is proud of you. And so I'll put links to both of your stuff in the show notes, but I'll just say out loud. So Scott, the best way to stay up to date on your case is where?
So the best way, if you go to our website, ouramazinggrace.net, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to sign up for the Substack. And
okay.
So the Substack, we have, that is the regular source of keeping up to speed with my writings, but we're always posting the legal updates through Substack. So as you know, I started releasing deposition transcripts. And so I'm doing that all through Substack. So that's how people can follow.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. William?
You can listen to my podcast, William Ramsey Investigates. All 5 of my books are on Amazon, and you can watch my documentaries on Patreon for $5 a month. You can just Watch on Prophet of Evil, Children of the Beast, 2 ones on Smiley Face Killers, and then I had one on Cold Hollywood. So you want to talk about the Great Delusion, where I've been deluded by many things. Like there's a lot to be deluded about. It's really true. And when it comes to like, it makes me think of like when Christ resurrected Lazarus, where he's talking to God. He says, "You can do great and mighty." I don't remember it verbatim, but you can do great and mighty things. And I thank you for showing this to me. So we're blessed to have, at least some of these people do not know they're deluded. So at least just the fact that we're able to say we might be being deluded on certain things. And I think we're deluded on everything: financial, political, cultural. Like it's
everything.
All deluded. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what comes to me. But thanks for the invite, Tanner. It's great to be with both of you. Thank you.
William, have you studied any of Bill Cooper's work? I'm guessing you have.
Voluminously, yeah, of course. I've listened to all of his stuff on, it was Mystery Babylon. I used to listen to those. I've listened to those like 3 or 4 times. Like it really at the beginning of kind of like when I was looking into alternate research, like after 9/11. But yeah, I have his book, Pale Horse, Behold the Pale Horse.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, he was. It's funny how how much of his stuff was covered up.
Yeah.
Interesting, because it just shows you this stuff has been out there. People have been sharing the truth for that
he was trying. He was one of the guys who he and Dave McGowan, rest their souls, both of them got 9/11 right at the beginning, and Pre kind of sensed it, and then both died. Like I think they got Bill like within a month or two of 9/11, and then McGowan died in 2015 of cancer, but he was a smoker. So I met him, and I saw him smoking pretty intensely. So if he died of lung cancer, it's not. I don't know. Yeah, it goes against the notion that he was murdered or whatever. But still, yeah, Bill Cooper. I think I've done an interview called "Behold a Pale Horse," the guy who did his biography. And I think he was kind of on the journey. He was an naval intelligence officer. He kind of retracted his belief in UFOs. And but I think his Mystery Babylon, for the time, you have to understand these guys are doing this research at the beginning of the internet, or like really early research.
Right. Where they were actually going to the library and getting books. Right?
Yeah. So I think it's good. And I mean, the one that always resonates with me is the one he did about the UN and the meditation room and the occult elements of all that stuff. Like, I think the Mystery Babylon is still legit. I think it's still good. So I recommend people check that out. Check out his old stuff. The audios are around somewhere. I don't know where you can find them. I think Mystery Babylon was like a series of 8 episodes or 10. I don't remember. But it was a bunch of episodes kind of about kind of modern occultism. But it was one of his series. It was really good. Yeah.
It was a radio program kind of in the style of Alex Jones, or?
Yeah, he really didn't trust Alex Jones either.
Program.
Yeah. It's called The Hour of the Time. So you can kind of see little glimmers of that. So he was one of the early ones. And I've also been kind of keeping the Visigoth are really almost like the new kind of alternate media. So many people were on Visigoths. Beyond the Grassy Knoll was kind of the title of one of them. He also did the Alembic Files and all these other. But I've kept his archive of almost 800 episodes at least, or 900 episodes. You can find that online. You can go to my Spreaker channel and see those. But so many of the people that you see around today were on that show, like incredible, like Chris Knowles and so many other characters who were around in the alternate media were there on Visigoth's show. So they're worthwhile, and kind of as a timestamp of people starting to connect even before podcasting. Like it was pre-podcast. I would call it a podcast now, but this is kind of like an online radio. Joan Mellon, so many JFK researchers, just guys who are still kind of just grinding along with their research. We're all going through all these early shows, so I think there's still a good, like Bill Cooper and Visigoth, still a good repository of information.
Yeah. I just want to ask you one more thing. You were doing a series during when COVID was kind of in its height. What was that series called?
Bioweapon Blues.
The Bioweapon Blues.
Yeah, 49 episodes.
Yeah.
And it really started, it was from 2022 to the end of 2023. And it was really when I realized that they deployed a bioweapon. Like I thought they were putting out a vaccine, but then, and this is to Zuckerberg's great derision, and he's a monster, but there were people putting on like suddenly died on Facebook and telling their stories about their family members are dead. And so like a memorial, whole families were being wiped out. And I was trying to memorialize those or put those out. And they kept getting shut down and censored. So Zuckerberg's trying to go through some kind of character change or something. They all are, actually. They're all kind of adapting to this new environment when they were involved in censorship and didn't fight. And I think he's responsible for massive child rape, too, on Facebook. So anybody who supports Facebook, you got to wonder about their morale. Like, are you going to make changes in the world and do the right thing and get off of these freaking websites? Yeah. Like, how honest are you if you support these places that advocate for mass murder, democide, and child rape? Like, what you're a Christian on Facebook? Like, that to me doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so that's why I canceled it on Facebook. But yeah, so I did 50 things. It was all based upon died suddenly, and then it was suppressed. But there's a lot of videos still out there. People can follow my research, and I read a lot of like the leading researchers into the record on COVID, and a lot of people who were following the stories, and a lot of intellectuals, names like Thorpe or Denis Rancourt, or some of these other people who, like, hey, these deaths are tied to the rollout of the shot, not to the COVID,
right?
The so-called virus, whatever. I was actually very, very sick. 2020, the sickest I've ever been in my life was January 2020. So something got rolled out. Like I was down for a week, and I've actually heard of other people who also were very sick around that time with something strange. I had a cough. I didn't have a fever. It was really weird because I had like problems with my kidneys, and I had a cough that wouldn't quit. I had to kind of have a bottle of honey that I would kind of sip for 24 hours, like when I was awake, when I wasn't sleeping. And I was weak. Like when it left, I was weak for 3 or 4 days. I lost 10 pounds. But something they did something. Like this is all a secret. I don't know what it was.
I had that in March of 20. The cough. Same thing, no fever, just this cough from hell. And like eventually I was coughing up blood, and then it went away. But I've had I call that the first time. I've had COVID 2 other times. I had the Omicron and whatever it was, however they were getting it around. I mean, in my mind, the PCR test is a good way to inoculate somebody if you don't know what they put in there, but
you can't trust them on anything anymore. So they're
I'm so cynical.
Poisoning everything now. So, but
Who
anyway, it was bioweapon brews. That's when I realized it was a bioweapon. It wasn't a vaccine. It never was a vaccine. They're still lying. Actually, Fauci's out there lying more. I can't believe he's not in jail. It says everything about the legal profession in the United States that he's still walking around lying to people after being involved in mass murder and democide. It's incredible. But I think that somebody actually complimented me, and I will never get the appreciation. They said you should have gotten some kind of award for putting that together.
Well, because it's there. I'm glad that we have it. You did a great job of archiving the times, and Scott, same with your work too. A lot of it, just the bravery that it took to stand up. Even now, still, try to talk to people who never really came to truth about the subject, and it alienates you, and it's just a difficult subject to breach. But you guys did a great job, and thanks for your bravery.
Oh, thanks for having both of us today, Tanner. This was really nice.
Yeah,
it was a nice break for me.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And nice to meet you, William. This is fantastic.
Likewise, nice to meet you as well, Scott.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop here.